Welcome to episode 8 of the Production Roundtable series. I'm Evan Clary, and today I'm joined by John Rastetter and John Burgess of PAMARCO. How are y'all doing today?
Fantastic.
Doing good, Evan. Good morning to you. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. I'm excited that you guys were able to join. You guys have been on my list of people to come on to the show, so I'm very excited. So I guess to get started, tell me about PAMARCO. What's unique about what you guys do?
Well, PAMARCO is a company that has been around for 74 years now making analogs, and we were the original developer of the analogs roll when Flexo was known as aniline printing. So we'd like to think we know a thing or two about Flexo and how best to use our product to make your product better. We are well distributed from a geographic standpoint, and I think that's one of our biggest differentiators. In the analogs market, we have a manufacturing plant in Atlanta, one in Chicago, and one in California. And particularly when you look at the corrugated industry and the focus of the corrugated and where the plants are, we're very, very close to our customers. And that's very important when it comes to turnaround from a roll in to roll out situation. And also with the ever increasing cost of transportation, it really helps keep the transport costs down. And I think that's why we are very well versed with all the national accounts, the Georgia Pacifics, the International Papers, Westrox. They like doing business with us because in the main, most of their plants are close to our plants. And it makes ease of logistics very easy. I think the other big differentiator also is we have a very high volume of OEM business, particularly for the OEMs here in the United States for the corrugated converting equipment, and we make all our own cores. We have a plant that's dedicated to the task in Kentucky, and that plant distributes manufactured cores to our 3 laser engraving plants and our 1 mechanical engraving plant in Roselle, New Jersey. So we have a very, very good supply chain as we're making the majority of our own bases.
You guys have a pretty strong international presence, don't you?
We do. We do. We have a plant in Manchester in the UK, and from that plant we service Europe, the Far East, the Middle East, and Africa. Again, with the OEM customers on the continent, we service them with rolls, and those are for machines coming to the United States in the main. So we have a unique offering where we can manufacture rolls in Manchester and ship them to the OEM on the continent. And then when the customer desires spare rolls here in the United States, we can make them to exactly the same specification, but instead of making them in England and freighting them all the way to the States, we'll make them in the most local plant to that customer to exactly the same specifications using data that we determine from the manufacturer of the original rolls.
So that I have an idea about how many analogs rolls are sold each year.
It's a lot more than anybody would ever give credit for. It's thousands of rolls per year, both new and refurbished. The refurbished product is our biggest turnover item, which is customers' rolls that need resurfacing. But with the proliferation of new equipment, both for corrugated and flexible packaging the last few years, we are doing almost as many new rolls and sleeves these days as we are refurbished analogs. In the old days, it was probably 70% refurbished, 30% new. These days, it's more like 50-50 new to refurbish. And of course, you get some of these newer high board line, high graphics machines that have the analogs turrets. So a customer is buying an 8-color machine and they're potentially buying a 16 or 24 analogs rolls to equip the turrets and to have a set of rolls both for process and for line work.
It's crazy to think 16 to 24 analogs rolls for one machine.
Yeah,
it is.
We also service the preprint liner market, and there's been a number of new presses that have been installed here in North America, some of which are robotically controlled. And those Analox numbers are up in the 30 plus count, all being handled by robotics to get them in and out of these new presses. So that part of the industry for us has been a very important component, and some of the highest precision as well. So screen rulings up to, or screens on the plates up to 175 line.
Wow. Yeah, it sounds like it could be a potential anchor for you guys with 30 Analox rolls in there. All right, well, let's move on. What component is most important when manufacturing an Analox?
All of them. I think that's the simple answer. You can't build quality in at the end. So what we have done in all of our facilities is bought the state-of-the-art equipment, and every plant has like equipment. So you've got obviously the big lump of metal that's the core, that is the heart of the Analox roll, or in the case of the preprint rolls, it's a carbon fiber core, not a steel core. Then you have to coat using a hard, dense coating, which in our case is chromium oxide. You have to grind, you have to polish, and then you have to laser engrave. And there is no one step that's more important than the other. Every step builds the quality in. Final inspection doesn't happen at the end of the process. Inspection has to happen every part of the process from beginning to end, or else you don't get an Analox roll that satisfies the customer's needs.
From start to finish, you just listed a couple processes involved in the manufacturing. From start to finish, about how much time does it take to make an Analox roll?
Well, in real terms, it takes probably less than a week in terms of actual touch time and process time, because the queue is so big and we all have backlogs in our facilities. You're talking 4 to 6 weeks generally to manufacture a brand new Analox roll, certainly, and somewhere in the 2 to 4 week range to refurbish an Analox roll. One of the big things in the refurbishment is the preparation work we have to do to the roll. When a roll comes into us, we have to check the journals, the bearing surfaces, obviously the face of the cylinder. We have to turn down, and we may have to weld up or spray a material to it to restore the diameter. And then we get into the spraying of the chrome oxide, the diamond grinding, the diamond polishing, and then the laser engraving. So, as I say, in terms of touch time, less than a week. In terms of actual real time, more like 2 to 4 weeks.
Sure. What is the biggest misconception when specifying Analox for corrugated?
John, maybe I'll take this one. I think the big discussion point is always starting with volume, because we print on such a wide variety of substrates, surface area. So between craft or coated product, it's going to require somewhat of a different volume. So we start with volume. So if you're looking at a combination solids on craft, you're looking at an 8 BCM. If you're looking at that same combination on a coated job, it's going to be 6.5 BCM. But what we find is that the extended cell technology that we introduced to the market, called eFlow, gives us the ability to work with the same volumes, but enhance the characteristic of the Analox roll to get better transfer, to get the Analox roll replenishes itself more readily, so that our customers find a great reduction in the need for something like skip feed, for example, where you're able to get good solid coverage at the high speeds without making those adjustments. So to go back to the very beginning, we're going to want to start with volume based on the substrate that the customer is printing. And of course, graphics comes into this, but work to be able to identify the volume necessary, and then increase, and then back into the line per inch. So, in a 7 BCM roll, for example, would be recommending a 400 line eFlow engraving, or a 250 line thermoflow engraving, a 60-degree cell.
I see. So do you often have customers approach asking for advice on what type of analogs rolls they need? How does that process work? Or do they generally already know what it is that they need?
That's a really good question, because what we often do if they're buying a new piece of converting equipment is recommend that all of the key suppliers sit around the table, determine what the product kind of expectations for increased graphics are required, and then have the input from the ink manufacturer, the printing plate manufacturer, trade shop that's producing the plates. And then once we understand the various components, we will work with the customer to select the volume and the line count, the type of cell that's going to print the best for that combination of work. That ensures that we start off on the right foot and we get the highest probability of success on what that new converting equipment is going to produce.
Definitely. We do the same thing for, some of the questions that customers have, where we'll bring in all the suppliers and have a roundtable, because it's always good to put the problem out there and see what everybody's solution is, because that way you have nobody pointing fingers back and forth at each other for any issues. It's always good to have everybody sit down and talk about it. So I can definitely see that.
For sure. And there's no problem these days that somebody else hasn't seen and overcome. So with a lot of experience around a table, you can certainly get to grips with the problem and then solve the problem. I think we've got a very, very educated customer base these days, but one of the problems that there used to be was that customers would try to do too much too quickly with a piece of equipment. And again, the similar discussion to the how do you build a quality analogs, you only get a good print job when all components of that print job, i.e. the plates, the inks, the analogs, are working together. And obviously, if you're doing high graphics, the dryers as well. So that's where it's very, very good to bring all those suppliers together and get some consensus. You don't always get it right, but I think you get it right more times than you get it wrong by bringing a group of people together like that.
I agree. And if you don't get it right at first, when you have a group of people like that together, you will get it right eventually.
Yeah.
What is the most common type of analogs used in corrugated printing?
We've mentioned a few minutes ago 2 different engravings, thermoflow, which is our 60-degree engraving, and then an extended cell e-flow technology that we developed almost 10 years ago. Today, e-flow technology represents well over 60% of what we sell into the corrugated market. And as I mentioned, we're able to go from a standard 60-degree engraving and increase the line count by 40% roughly. And that helps with combination work. So you're able to get better control of the ink distribution onto the plate and onto the substrate. But more importantly, it also increases the ability of the roll to stay clean. If you can envision an elongated cell with, as it rotates through the chamber, you have a channel that is flushing the cell clean, so that you're able to keep that analogs roll cleaner for longer periods of time. And then when you do go to clean it, it's more readily cleanable. So over that period of time, with the elimination of, or the great reduction in the need for skip feed, and the increasing graphics at all of our customers, the combination of the higher screen and the better transfer of ink, the replenishment of the analogs roll with ink, add some really big benefits to those customers who've chose to use it.
Sure. What cell count do you see most often in the U.S. market for corrugated?
And again, I'll go back to the volume first. The typical volume is in that 8 BCM range. That probably is the sweet spot for the vast majority of customers. And you're going to be looking at a line count between 250 for conventional and around 400 for e-flow technology.
Okay.
But also we have to say now that particularly with the independent customers that we have, we see some customers now pushing line counts up to 1,000, 1,200, and 1,400 with some of these high-end graphics converting machines. And they are really pushing the envelope and doing an incredible job of printing with those high-end analogs.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting the way that independents are creating that space for themselves. They're really creating a niche that will hopefully be around for a long time, and it's good for them. It's good business.
Well, we see it as an adjunct to the digital business. Many people have asked us for many years now, do we see the digital business ever overcoming the flexo business? And our answer has been simply, no, we see one living with the other. Digital is great in its market space, which is fairly short run, very, very high graphic printing. Flexo is fantastic for long run, high graphic flexo printing, and the two can live in the same space. And we've got many independent customers now that have one of each or two of each in their facility, and they live together very well.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And the other side of that statement too, with the importance of flexo, is that there's too many brown boxes with one color, black ink, that are made to come off of a digital press. I mean, that's a huge percentage of the boxes that are made. There's, you know, a lot of boxes in the high graphic side of the business, but then there's a lot of one color brown boxes as well.
Yeah, I think we all get very enamored with the high graphics business, but I think it accounts for less than 10% of the total corrugated box business, and 90% of it is still 1 and 2 color block print, very simple. And flexo, high-speed flexo these days is the ideal way to do that.
Exactly. I don't see digital replacing that in my lifetime, at least. I just can't see it happening. But I did hear a couple of years ago at a trade show, someone who came from another industry say that all flexo printing would be gone within 3 years. And I believe that was about 2 years ago. And I haven't seen it start to happen yet.
No, if you came to one of our plants and saw the number of rolls in our shop floors, you'd realize that flexo printing isn't going away anytime soon.
I don't think so either.
There's a good example. There was a good example out on the West Coast. Customer had started with digital and had built a really nice business servicing the wine box industry. And then after they had established that business, they couldn't keep up with it. So then they went out and bought a high graphics machine. And in this case, it worked the other way around. They started in digital, but then ended up in flexo because they just needed the capacity and the speed.
Yeah, the production capability.
Yeah,
it's
so
vastly different.
They live well together.
Speaking of the analogs, what's the best method to clean them? Because I know that there's a couple different ways that people clean them.
Well, let's start with some kind of best practices to begin with. The first thing that we deal with this on almost a daily basis. The first is that you always have to use detergent, soap, in the automatic wash cycles. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that you're not just rinsing with water. And then you want to try to rinse with water temperatures in conjunction with the soap in that 120-degree range. If you purely flush with water and don't include a surfactant or a soap, you shift the pH of the ink as you're attempting to clean it. And by shifting the pH, you cause plugging. So water isn't good enough. So anytime you do an automatic wash-up cycle, you have to include the soap.
By plugging, do you mean you're changing the viscosity of the ink and then clogging the cells?
You're shifting the pH of the ink because you're going from high pH down to neutral, and by shifting that pH, you're causing the ink to cross-link or cure. So that's a contributor to plugging in the cells. By using a soap, you're going to have, instead of having a 9.5 pH like the ink, you're going to be 10 to 11 pH, which will aid in the flushing and the elimination of the pigment and the vehicle that you have in the bottom of the cells. So that's the first thing. You always want to use a soap. The second is that with all the EH&S and lockout, tagout, it's virtually impossible to hand clean an analox roll while it's in the press any longer. Because once you go to hand scrub, you're only going to get a few inches, and then it needs to be rotated, and you have to lock it back out again, or unlock it and lock it. So there's a product that we sell called the cleaning plate. The cleaning plate is a microfiber pad that's the size of the analox roll, both width and circumference. It's mounted into the printing plate, onto the plate cylinder, and by circulating through the inking system, open water, this pad scrubs the surface of the analox roll. And in fact, on a vacuum feed system, you're able to print a job while you're cleaning it down that's not being used. So it seems extremely efficient way of cleaning. One of PAMARCO companies called Absolute also is manufacturing a ultrasonic system called Sono, and it mounts directly to the analox roll where the chamber would normally be. And you're able to rotate the analox roll and clean with the soap and a water combination using ultrasonics. So there's a number of different ways to clean. But if you go back to the very beginning and you use proper surfactant, soap and water, and you do that on every color change, and you don't let the rolls sit idle with ink on it, and you use the cleaning plate, your rolls are going to stay completely clean. And we have a process that we use called an audit, and our guys are, even through this COVID period, going into plants, auditing the rolls, providing a report card back of the condition, and then we work with the plants to develop a cleaning schedule or program to address what we find in the audit process.
What would you say? Sorry, go ahead, John.
So, Evan, I was about to say, I think one of the things that's paramount in any of our customers, particularly those using the high cell analogs like the 600, 800s, 1000s, is if you plug them slightly, when you've only got volumes of 1.5, 2.5 BCM, you're really going to impact your print fidelity. So what you have to do is come up with a cleaning regime that is daily, weekly, monthly. So it's not just pick one of those items that John just discussed and do it that way. You have to clean during the wash-up cycle. You have to clean with the plate. And then maybe, as some of our customers do, when you take the analoxes out, you have an off-press ultrasonic cleaner that you drop your analogs into and do a thorough cleaning. So it's not just carry out one of the operations and think that you've solved any of the cleaning problems. All of them should be employed at some stage or another. And obviously with the high graphics machines these days, the takeout of the analox roll is done much more efficiently than the old 12 hours and 4 maintenance men that it used to be. On some of the modern machines, you can get the analox out in 15 minutes now and be able to get it into an ultrasonic tank and cleaned, or in fact soda blasted and cleaned, but do it off press, which is a thorough cleaning.
I know that in our Flexo, we can change analox rolls in 20 minutes. We have one of those carts that we use. Let me ask you this, as far as maintenance of analox rolls, what's the expected lifespan until resurfacing if an analox roll is maintained well and if an analox roll is maintained poorly?
Well, we've seen analox rolls installed and then pulled the following day because there's been a problem and maintenance was poor, or something got through the inknet and destroyed the roll. I think what customers have to do these days is set themselves parameters for volume loss. As John said, it's all about the volume. So you've got to know at what point is the volume getting so little that you can't get the correct ink strength. And that's where having an audit done on a regular basis, as we do for many of our customers, is going to maintain a record and show you the degradation of that Analox roll over time. And we have many, many customers that have had Analoxes on press for 5 and 6 years without any issue. Again, we also have customers that run some of the high-speed flexos, and 6 to 12 months could be the lifespan of the Analox. The other thing to remember these days as well is a lot of our customers are buying 4-color machines, but they're only running 1 or 2 colors in those machines on a daily basis because they set up and run and then set up another job in one of the other print sections. So the rolls really aren't put through the grind like they used to be with the S&S's and the Langstons and the Staleys of old.
So 1-2-color machines.
Exactly. So there isn't a great answer, but maintenance is the answer. And again, when you get down, we also service the jumbo Analox roll business for the jumbo flexos. You don't want to be pulling those things every 6 months. So that's where cleaning is absolutely paramount.
Have you been down to Ringgold, Georgia, and seen the 2 Sorenkos side by side down there, the jumbos?
No, I've never seen that machine.
So my dad built those, and he has a rollout print station because it's a jumbo die cutter and a jumbo flexo next to each other, the 88 by 200. And you can push one of the print stations across the room to the other jumbo, and so that they didn't have to buy 2 print stations. But that's a heavy, heavy print section to move.
I can only imagine.
Well, in our plant in Atlanta, we service the jumbo Analox market for the entire country. It makes no sense to have that size of equipment in all of our facilities. But at any one time, we normally have 5 to 8 jumbo rolls in-house coming from all over the United States and Mexico. It's a huge piece of business. And in fact, we're seeing several more jumbo machines being sold currently. So it seems to go through a cycle where there's no machine sold for many, many years, just like preprint. And then people are picking back up again now. And we've seen 3 or 4 machines sell just recently.
Yeah, the jumbo market's really interesting because you can tie up a corrugator with 2 or 3 jumbos if you have them, humming at high speed. It's a lot of paper that you're selling. So,
right.
And the other thing is the jumbo business. A lot of that is the mattress business because they keep trying to ship mattresses in bags, but the problem is moisture and mold, whereas the corrugated breathes.
Right. Yeah, it's most of our jumbo business is for appliances, furniture, and mattresses.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on. I think I'm going to have you guys on here sometime again soon because from our conversation, I've generated a lot more questions that I'm going to need to ask you. But thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Well, we really appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this, Evan. I think it's a great thing you're doing for the industry, particularly during this COVID time. And if we can help any of your customers, please don't hesitate to reach out to us.